Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be talking about the elections that occurred on Tuesday night, so by the time this comes out on Thursday morning, that will have been 2 days ago, but still very relevant, still very interesting, and I'd also like to point out that I am trying to stop slacking off on my YouTube uploads. Obviously I have been busy and have other things to do in my life, but going to try to find the time to film at least 10 to 12 minutes of content every couple of days. So we're doing 2 in a row. Obviously, yesterday's video was me ranking every president. So if you did not watch that and are interested, you should go watch that. But let's start by talking about the 4th district for this video. So Virginia's 4th congressional district is in the south eastern part of the state. It is kind of in the Richmond area. It doesn't show the full map of Virginia, but it's kind of, to the east of it would be, Virginia Beach. And then to the north of it, you have, a bit more of Richmond. And then you're kind of driving all the way up to Maryland at that point. So, it's a blue district. It's been a blue district for a while. That's mostly because Democrats do very well in Richmond, which is right here. And they also do very well in these, or have done really well in these southern counties, which are rural black voters. And so this seat was represented by a black Democrat, Donald McCeachin, who unfortunately passed away in November after getting reelected. And he repped the seat for a while, but the seat was never really in play. It was never really contested. It was never really paid much attention to, because McCeachin was the incumbent. He was always going to win, and he had the seat, unfortunately, until he passed away. And so this district was never, ever in play for the Republicans. And, this was a special election. As I'm sure we all know, special elections can lead to some pretty weird things. The Republicans did not really have a chance of winning it. They did, however, have a chance to maybe make some gains. Maybe they were going to crack 40. Because, again, if you look at 2022, just last November, they got, 36% of the vote. So maybe they were hoping to get 40 in a best-case scenario. That, as you can see, did not happen. The Republicans were reduced to only 26% of the vote. And by the way, Jen McClellan, she won by 48 points. And as was evidenced in the 2022 map, Donald McCeachin just in November. So again, only a couple of months ago, not that long ago, he won by 28. So McClellan did 20 points better than McCeachin just 3 months later. Now, in fairness, you could say turnout decreased. You could say special elections are weird. But I think it's worth noting because, again, she flipped a lot of counties that had voted Republican in November. And yeah, well, Republican turnout dipped. We still have evidence that there was some level of, Republican voters that were voting for Jen McClellan. And I think most importantly, this really just illustrates the enthusiasm gap between the parties and just where the momentum is, right? Like a year ago at this time, it was, February, March 2022, last year. Republicans had all the momentum. They had all the enthusiasm, and they were looking for a red wave midterm. Now, that did not happen. That never really materialized. But they did have the momentum at that time. And, if you go back to my predictions from a year ago, I think I had them at 53 Senate seats. And I didn't do House predictions back then because we didn't have the full map. But, I had them doing very, very well in the House. I'll tell you that. And so momentum changes a lot in politics. Is often very strange. But Democrats have had like an undeniable wave of, victories really ever since the Dobbs decision. But I think it all really culminated in November where the red wave really did not happen. Again, Democrats, they won Pat Ryan's seat in August. Mary Peltola won Alaska, I believe, in either late August or very early September. I forgot when, but it was around that time period. And those were all big victories for Democrats, but there was still talk of a red wave until it did not happen, until, 9:30, 10 o'clock on November 8th, when there was nothing really happening for Republicans that they were expecting. And so Democrats took that, they rode with it, and Biden's approval is up now. And I think that once you have the string of victories, they just keep coming until eventually they stop, which, by the way, could happen at any moment. But for right now, Democrats just did 20 points better in a district in a state that elected a Republican governor just, a year and a half ago, right? 2021, Youngkin won. So I think this is clear evidence that Democrats are in a much better spot they've been, in quite some time. And I think that you can make a very real case that this is an example of them building momentum, even though I think we should avoid drawing sweeping conclusions. But I just want to say very clear signs of momentum for the Democratic Party. But the victories for Democrats did not end there, because in Wisconsin, which, as I'm sure we all know, very important state, Democrats had a very, very strong showing. So if those of you who don't know, Wisconsin likes to do off-year Supreme Court elections, and so we had the jungle primary this year where both the Democrats and Republicans all ran, and we had multiple candidates, right? But most importantly, we saw one Democrat, Janet Protasewicz, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. I very possibly butchered that, but I believe it's pronounced Protasewicz. She was the leading Democrat. She was always going to win. As you can see, she got, ironically enough, she actually got basically the same amount of vote share that Hillary Clinton got 7 years ago in 2016, but she ran in a race of 4 rather than a race of really 2. And so, Protasewicz was the main Democrat. She was always going to win. But the question was, would Republicans nominate either Daniel Kelly or Jennifer Darrow? Kelly was, he's more conservative, was supposedly a better appeal to rural areas. And Darrow, as you can see, the only 2 counties she won were Waukesha and Washington, which are the 2 suburbs outside of Milwaukee. They are have historically been very Republican. And she was the preferred candidate among most Republicans for electability. Now, obviously, the 232,000 people who voted for Dan Kelly over her likely disagreed. But again, Janet Protasewicz, I think her campaign would have liked to run against Kelly more than Darrow. And this, we're seeing a continuation of the trend of Republicans having good options like Jennifer Darrow, but still not being able to nominate them and losing in contested primaries just because the base has a tendency to pick these unelectable candidates. So Kelly versus Protasewicz, we've already seen this movie before, really, because in 2020, Dan Kelly was also the GOP nominee. He actually lost re-election to Jill Karofsky by 10% in the general, or 10.5% in the general election. It was a very bad performance for Dan Kelly because, again, he was the incumbent, and he had actually got he'd received 50% of the vote in the February primary. And so he was expected to win. And actually, ironically enough, this is around the time I started my channel. I was obviously a lot younger, knew a lot less about politics back then. But ironically, I remember in April 2020, Democrats were already suing to try to reschedule the election because they thought since there'd be a low turnout and since, there'd really be no, machine or preparation for them in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, they were like, wait a minute, this election's illegitimate. We're going to have to do a rerun. And they actually threatened to sue to just cancel the election and run it back another time. And then Karofsky, their candidate, the justice from a liberal justice from Dane County, won, and Democrats like, well, wait a minute, because they were very surprised. And so that's kind of where Kelly's downfall began, because he had won before, but he just had a very, very poor showing in this election. And what we really saw was that he was, unable to appeal to both working class voters, and he also underperformed in the Milwaukee suburbs, which have moved even more to the left since then, as evidenced in the gubernatorial election last year. So Dan Kelly, very poor candidate. And, again, Democrats combined for 54% of the vote in this primary. Again, it's not everything, just as Dan Kelly himself, who won the primary vote but lost the general election. But again, Democrats combined for 54% because Everett Mitchell was a Democrat, or a liberal rather. And so when you combine for 54% in a primary, you should expect to win that election. It's not a guarantee, which is why I'm starting off as lean Democratic and not, safe Democratic. But, Janet Protasewicz seems like a pretty strong candidate to me. Dan Kelly has already lost by, double digits statewide before. I think as of right now, based on what we've been seeing in Wisconsin for the past couple of months with Tony Evers getting reelected and Democrats outperforming, I think Dan Kelly starts off as an underdog. He could absolutely win, but turnout dynamics do not seem to be favoring Republicans right now. Again, judicial, slots locally especially have a lot of say on abortion. Wisconsin is a very pro-choice state, and the pro-choice position in Wisconsin consistently pulls ahead of the Democratic Party. So if Protasewicz can kind of get all those pro-choice voters on her side, even most of them, I think that she will very likely win this race. So that's where I stand on it right now. But I just want to, update you guys, because I think this was a really good night for Democrats. Obviously, wasn't any major elections, not anything super high profile, but still, they got the job done. I think they did a lot better than really anyone expected, especially in Virginia. So if you enjoyed the update, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next video.